This is All India Radio. In Surkhiyon, we now bring you part 2 of India Connect with USA and Quad, a special program on Prime Minister's visit to USA.
Namaskar and welcome to this edition of special program India Connect with US and Quad on Prime Minister's visit to USA. Listeners might be aware that much-awaited meeting between the Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the US President Joe Biden will take place at the White House in Washington in a short while from now. It will be followed later by his meeting with the Quad leaders. Mr. Modi has already held talks on bilateral, regional and global issues with the US Vice President Kamala Harris and the Australian and Japanese Prime Ministers. He also interacted with top industry leaders in USA. In this program, we shall provide the glimpses of the media briefing by the Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla in Washington. It sums up what has happened so far and what is up next. The Foreign Secretary shared the outcome of Prime Minister's meeting with the top CEOs.
First company Prime Minister met was Qualcomm. This is a global leader in chip manufacturing. They're a very high-tech company. Prime Minister discussed 5G connectivity and Digital India flagship program with the CEO of Qualcomm. The CEO was very, very optimistic on India. He called it the number one growth destination for companies in the world. The second CEO the Prime Minister met was the CEO of Adobe. Again, this is a company that has made enormous strides using technology in the creative domain. Prime Minister discussed education technology, startups, innovation, animation for the youth. There was a lot of discussion on how technology can benefit younger people, particularly school-going students. The third meeting was with the CEO of First Solar. This is a leader in solar making equipment. They manufacture, their technology is a new one. This is a very unique technology in the field of solar energy using thin film technology, and discussion centered around their plans to invest significant amounts in setting up solar manufacturing facility in India. I'm told that they're looking at a facility which has a capacity of 3.3 gigawatts. As you can imagine, that's a very significant capacity and investments worth $675 million. The CEO of First Solar discussed also the green hydrogen mission that the Prime Minister had announced, and there was also a sense of interest in Prime Minister's vision of one world, one sun, one grid. The fourth company was General Atomics, which centered around India's recent drone policy, including the PLI scheme. And the last group was the Blackstone Group, which has made it's a major asset management company. It has a very large presence in India. It's a very significant investor in India, and from what I can see, the CEO announced plans to invest significantly more in the country. And there is a clear message from the business leaders of their appreciation of the recent reform measures in India that has made India a more business-friendly environment, liberal investment rules across different sectors, and of course they felt that there were significant investment opportunities in India.
Ahead of the Quad leaders' meeting, Mr. Modi's interaction with his Australian counterpart, Mr. Scott Morrison, emphasized the importance of deepening India-Australia relations.
The Prime Minister's meeting with Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison was the first in-person meeting that the two leaders have held in the post-pandemic period. They discussed a broad range of issues which covered bilateral, regional and global issues of mutual interest. They noted with satisfaction the high-level engagement between the two countries, particularly the first recently held India-Australia 2+2 dialogue which was held in New Delhi. They reviewed progress since the last Leaders Summit that was held virtually in June 2020, and they resolved to continue their close partnership and cooperation for the mutual well-being of both sides.
The Prime Minister was received warmly by the US Vice President Kamala Harris, who shared her views on key issues from COVID to climate change to cross-border terrorism.
Prime Minister had a bilateral meeting with Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. This was the Prime Minister's first formal interaction with the Vice President. The meeting focused on several substantive issues of discussion. Both the Prime Minister and Vice President Kamala Harris appreciated the India-US bilateral relationship, which they felt were on a strong footing, with given the shared values, common interests and growing strategic convergence. They exchanged views on recent regional developments of mutual interest, reaffirmed their commitments towards the free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific region.
Later, Mr. Modi held a one-to-one meeting with Japanese Premier Yoshihide Suga. The talks focused on areas like keeping Indo-Pacific free, open and inclusive.
Prime Minister's meeting with the Prime Minister of Japan, Excellency Mr. Yoshihide Suga, was also the first in-person meeting that the two leaders have had. Prime Minister specifically thanked Prime Minister Suga for very successfully hosting both the Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics in the midst of a global pandemic. The two Prime Ministers discussed exchanged views on recent global developments, including Afghanistan. They also reaffirmed their commitment towards the free, open, inclusive Indo-Pacific region. They agreed to enhance bilateral security and defense cooperation.
The action has shifted to White House, where Mr. Modi will hold his first in-person meeting with the US President Joe Biden. Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla shared the connect between the two leaders.
At their bilateral meeting, the Prime Minister and President Biden will review the robust and multifaceted India-US bilateral relationship. They will also discuss how the comprehensive strategic global partnership between our two countries can be enriched further. The two leaders are expected to discuss how to bolster bilateral trade and investment ties, strengthen defense and security collaboration, boost strategic clean energy partnership, explore new avenues in emerging technologies, including through R&D, innovation and industry linkages. The bilateral meetings would also feature current regional security situation following recent developments in Afghanistan.
The first ever Quad summit in person follows next. Foreign Secretary Shringla says it is a reflection of common interests and common concerns of India, United States, Japan and Australia.
This is the first plurilateral engagement of President Biden. It signaled the priority that his administration accorded to the Quad, and it was also the first meeting of Quad leaders, albeit virtually. We see the Quad as a partnership among four like-minded countries in the pursuit of common interests, in striving for a free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific region. At the summit in March, the leaders had announced a broad array of initiatives, including on vaccines, infrastructure, emerging technologies and climate change. The four leaders will share views and perspectives on the regional situation and the emerging challenges, including in South Asia and the Indo-Pacific region, on how to work together to contain COVID-19, evolve a common approach to emerging technologies and means of addressing climate change. The leaders will take stock of progress made since the March summit, especially in the COVID-19 vaccine partnership. They will identify new areas of cooperation that will reinforce the positive and constructive agenda of the Quad, including contemporary areas that will benefit the Indo-Pacific region as a whole. As you know, the Quad has acquired momentum in the recent past and has been seen as a natural evolution and elevation to the apex level in view of the fact that the four countries share core attributes such as democracy, commitment to pluralism, market-based economic principles. They also have a shared vision of a free and open inclusive Indo-Pacific region. To add prosperity to that as well, and with respect for international law.
Prime Minister's last engagement in US is his address to the UN General Assembly in New York, which is being awaited keenly by the global community.
On the 25th of September, Prime Minister will be the first head of state or government to address the United Nations General Assembly at its 76th session. The theme for this year's general debate is, and I quote, building resilience through hope to recover from COVID-19, rebuild sustainability, respond to the needs of the planet, respect the rights of people, and revitalize the United Nations. India is currently a member of the UN Security Council. We held the presidency in the month of August, and we steered the council at a fairly challenging time. While addressing the UN General Assembly, the Prime Minister would dwell on the important issues, including the regional situation, cross-border terrorism, global efforts to combat COVID-19 and climate change, and the need to reform multilateral institutions.
Prime Minister's visit is all set to start a new chapter in the global arena. The interactions and deliberations have clearly outlined the priorities of India and its deepening connect with its natural partners and strategic allies, the United States, Australia and Japan.
You were listening to part 2 of India Connect with USA and Quad, a special program on Prime Minister's visit to the USA. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official.